first two devos in this series about leaves were about faux covering and fading leaves. They were kind of heavy topics and a warning that we're not to cover our shame and hide from God, and we're not to forsake Him in favor of ourselves and never seek the good of others. But today we're looking at green leaves, and that's the name of this devotional. In the first part of the book of Psalm, it says, "Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in Him. He will be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when heat comes, and its leaves are always green. It has no worries in a year of drought and never fails to bear fruit." Think of the evergreen tree for the Christmas tree, all things full of life and hope. And that's what we read here. The alternative to those that do not trust in the Lord is not an evergreen. Right before this, there's another warning, a curse to those that draw strength from their flesh, those that turn away, dwelling in the desert, thirsty and hopeless. But don't you love that conjunction? It may be one of my favorite words in the Bible because there's always a but when we mess up. When we trust in the Lord, when our confidence is in Him and not in what we build or use to cover up through false religion or hypocrisy, then there's this amazing promise. Think of the prettiest river or stream or body of water you've visited where trees are huge and just beg you to park and sit and be and drink and observe. Just this past summer, we stayed in a house on a river with our family and daily went to the water to sit under the trees and bask in the beauty. There's nothing like it. Trees that are stately, tall, healthy, and oh yes, they have lots of green leaves. They make you want to linger. Take note of what makes these trees have green leaves. First of all, they're planted by the water, not in a high place away from His provision, but right where the water flows, and they drink from the stream. It says they're not fearful when heat comes, and heat will come, but because of the root system where the tree is planted, its leaves stay green instead of fading. It says they have no worries in a year of drought. Again, it's because of where they're planted and where they're drinking. Hot summers and droughts worry us all across the world because things die, water supplies dry up, crops suffer. Wouldn't it be awesome to have no worries in a time of drought? And these trees never fail to bear fruit. They don't just show leaves, but their reproductive systems are working well. Maybe that's why there's this draw to the river in the middle of the summer, why we like to wade and swim and tube down rivers, why we set up chairs and sit there all day, and why we take pictures of our families underneath trees, and why we feel so peaceful when we're near these trees that line the banks and wave their leaves in the wind. They speak of prosperity and good things and peace and life. So let's review again. The first couple had trees aplenty, a well-watered garden, but it wasn't enough, so they disobeyed and ran for cover from the fig leaves. Then God's people disobeyed and were lured away by false gods, false hope, and even set up among groves in high places. Apart from trusting in the one true God and loving others, they only loved themselves. Thus they had fading leaves. But now there's a picture of trees with green leaves, thriving. But note the placement of the trees that's obvious and necessary to grasp. They were planted by the water, and their roots ran deep in the stream of life. Have you ever heard of a tree or a grove that never fails to produce fruit? I have not, because we have harsh winters, devastating storms, and intense heat that affect orchards and gardeners, and it makes them sigh in angst when fruit doesn't appear. But the promise in these verses is that even with all of those adverse conditions in our life, if we're planted by the stream, we will have green leaves and fruit at all times. That's pretty amazing and impossible to comprehend, but totally possible when we drink and provide shade for others in the light of Him planted by the river.